Welcome everybody, good to see you all again. I'm sure at this time you've already seen the very moving tribute by Bob Dole to the late George Herbert Walker Bush in the Capitol Rotunda. How he was wheeled in by his assistant and with the help of his assistant struggled to stand. The man could not stand, cannot stand on his own. But he struggled to do it. And his assistant, knowing that this man could not stand, did the best job he could. And when Bob Dole got to his feet, he lifted up his right arm to salute the man in the casket. Not just because he was the former president of the United States, but because he was a fellow World War II veteran like himself. But unlike himself, George Bush, H.W., we'll call him from now on, came back from the war without incident, without injury. Bob Dole didn't. Bob Dole enlisted in the Army, became second lieutenant in the 10th Mountain Division, and while in combat near Castel de Aiano, he was wounded in the back and in the right arm. He was wounded so badly that they used his own blood to write the word M on his forehead. They had administered morphine to him. They had to. The pain was probably none of us will ever know. But they had to write the M on his forehead because someone else would come along and see that this man was in excruciating pain and would have administered a second dose of morphine, and that would have killed him. So luckily, he was not administered a second dose of morphine. But his right arm was damaged so badly that during his life, he used to hold a pen in his hand. That way, when you looked at him, you wouldn't notice that his arm was damaged. He held it high. He wanted you to see him as a fully functioning person, as someone that, although disabled, he could do his job as the senator from Kansas, previous to that, representative of Kansas, and previous to that, a state representative. So when he lifted up that arm, and say, why is it that he couldn't quite do it smoothly? Such a simple act that even an elderly person, no, even an elderly person in a wheelchair should be able to do. He couldn't quite do it right. It's because his arm was damaged. Now, he never thought that he could have a successful life, have a career, and became very despondent. He nearly died from a life-threatening infection when he got back, and they administered penicillin, and the penicillin wasn't working. So they gave him a dose of streptomycin, which was experimental at the time, and that healed him. But because of his despondency, they sent him to an orthopedist in Chicago, an orthopedist who just happened to be a survivor of the Armenian genocide. And this was the most perfect person you could send a despondent soldier to. The outlook of the Armenians after their genocide, after the Turks came in with the intention of converting everyone to Islam. But the Armenians held strong to their faith, their Christian faith, and they would not convert. So a genocide took place, and thousands of Armenians were crucified, and millions were killed. But it's something we don't talk about today. He was sent to Hamper Kelikian. And this man, an Armenian, to become stronger after their genocide and hold to their faith still. Operated on Robert Dole, at the time, Robert Dole, 7 times and did not charge him once. He told him that, no, it's true, you'll never be the same. But what Bob Dole came away with after being counseled, not just having medical procedures performed on him by this doctor, but being counseled by this man, was Hamper said to him, yes, you have lost some things, but you must look at what you have left. You must look at what you have and what you can do with what you have. And from there, you can attain greatness. And Bob Dole did. Bob Dole became first in 1960, was elected to the House of Representatives. And then later in the 60s, I believe it was 1968, he became senator from Kansas, and held that position to 1996 in July, when he formally retired from the Senate because he was running for president. He got the nomination for president by the Republican Party in 1996. In 1976, he kind of got close to the White House because he got the nomination for vice president under Gerald Ford. So twice Bob Dole lost. See, Bill Clinton won in 1996. Even with all the scandals, he won. Bob Dole is a great man, and he continues with his charitable work. To this day, he continues with his charitable work. He never really retired, you could say. But interesting part is that this man that's lying in the casket, there's a difference between these two men in many ways, more than one was injured and one wasn't injured. The man lying in the casket, well, his family, he too was accused of racism. Yes, in 1988, he was accused during his election of being a racist. As every Republican is accused of being a racist, a Nazi, member of the KKK. The Democrats always do that. When it's the Democrats that actually had someone in office that was a member of the KKK. Robert Byrd. Yes, Robert Byrd. I've said it many times. George W. Bush was also accused of being a Nazi, a Klan member, a racist. They accused, and Mitt Romney, all the same thing. They accused all of them of the same. That it was the Bushes that had the closest link to the Nazis, because Prescott Bush, which was George Bush's father, George H.W. Bush's father, had a bank. And Hitler and the Nazis held all their money in that bank. So there was a connection with Hitler in the Bush family. But it's interesting that the Democrats who were completely against George Bush W. and also the father because of the wars, and they protested every day because of the war. They let us know how many people were dying in that war. And George Bush lied, people died. He actually had a war that people died in for oil. It's very interesting that later on we find out that the Bushes had been vacationing with the Clintons. Now we know all the shenanigans of Bill Clinton. I won't go into that again. And how the left demonized George W. Bush and George Herbert Walker Bush. But it was when they found out that the Bushes voted for Hillary, and then W came out against Donald Trump and said some awful things about him, that all of a sudden the left forgot all the protests that they did. Every single person that died in the Iraq War, and even the previous Gulf War, they forgot all the numbers that they racked up, how evil George Bush was, and all the things they said against him. They loved him. He voted for Hillary. And after the election, Michelle Obama partied with the Bushes in Paris and sat on George Bush's lap and hugged him and kissed him and giggled and laughed. So why is it that the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bushes kind of all had something in common? Was it because, and we know, you see, they've changed the wording. You know, if you go on Google and you say nationalist, it'll tell you that it's connected with Hitler and Donald Trump. It has to do with Nazism. And the funny thing is, it has nothing to do with Nazism. It has to do with socialism. National simply meant Germany. It was the German Socialist Party. That's what Nazi meant, the German Socialist Party. The word national means nation, and it's always meant patriotism and a love of country. That's what it's always meant. It's never meant anything else. I would suggest you go to other sources and find the real definition for nationalism. Nothing to do with Nazism. National simply meant German. It was the Nazis, Hitler, that wanted a new world order. They wanted to rule the world. And the interesting thing is that we know that the Obamas wanted the TPP, which would have dissolved the borders and would have had international corporations running the whole world. And they could put any business in any country out of business. They're globalists. The Clintons are globalists. And then the Bushes do have a link to Nazism. You see, the difference between Bob Dole and the Bushes, I would say, are the ones that are responsible for the division in the Republican Party. Before this particular election, it doesn't matter what candidate. There's the Republicans doing their debates and the Democrats and their debates. And each candidate finds the dirt on the other candidate. And they put it into a commercial and they yell at, oh, you did this and you did that. And the debates rage on stage and they're call each other names. But afterwards, when one clear leader shines and gets the nomination, all the other candidates in that party fall in line and support the one who's the nominee. And it wasn't because Donald Trump did any worse than any other candidate did. You should see what Al Gore did to Mike Dukakis. All the things, he's the one who brought out the whole Willie Horton thing and prison furloughs. And Willie Horton got out and murdered somebody. They used to spew the worst propaganda about the other candidates to get you to vote for them. That's just the way it was done. But whoever got nominated, that's the person that all of them fell behind. They didn't fall behind, but they lined up and they would go out and they would campaign with them because it was important to get the agenda of their party, everything their party stands for, to get that into office. And of course, the Democrats would do the exact same thing. This is the first time that didn't happen. And it wasn't because Donald Trump was the worst candidate ever. You would think that anybody who fought in World War II would definitely stand behind a man who stood for America, who wanted to rebuild the military. After Obama took this country and broke it into as many pieces as he possibly could, he got as many groups together as he possibly could to fight against the people of this country. He got us into civil war where we would all hate each other and fight against each other. And that's what Henry Kissinger said to bring on the New World Order. You have to break up the entire world and get them fighting against each other. Henry Kissinger, very interesting. It was George H.W. Bush, who stood at the presidential podium and announced that we would change the world and give it a new world order. We would bring on globalism. That's the same thing the Nazis wanted to do. See, the people who are fighting against Trump and the whole idea of nationalists and separate countries is actually against the vision of Hitler. Hitler wanted a new world order. Globalism, that's what globalism is. The new world order. That's what Hillary wants. That's what Obama wants. So by calling Trump Hitler or Nazi because he wants to keep all the nations separate, which is actually a good thing, is against the New World Order, the idea, the vision of Hitler. It's against it. So it was the Bushes that voted against Trump and didn't stand, for the first time, they didn't stand behind Trump and campaign for Trump. And George W. came out and spoke against Trump. You never do that. He never came out and spoke a word against Obama, even though Obama was taking this country and everything it stood for and broke it into pieces and met in the White House with gangs, little thugs that would go out and cause violence. Bush never said anything. Trump isn't doing that. But Bob Dole, getting back to Bob Dole, that's why I'm saying he's the opposite of the man that was in that casket. Bob Dole first supported Jeb Bush. And then, when Donald Trump was the clear front winner, he got behind Donald Trump. Bob Dole did exactly what we used to do when the parties would unite behind the nominee, the front runner. Get behind them and support them, not break the party into pieces and get behind the battle cry that this guy is actually Hitler. This guy is the Ku Klux Klan member. No. Bob Dole did what you're supposed to do. He got behind Donald Trump, and he was at that convention. The Bushes did not do that. The Bushes, no matter how wonderful that he was, some say that, oh, he was so dignified. Isn't it wonderful how he loved the doggies and he went outside, had his picture taken with the little puppies running around him. He was just a wonderful man. He was a wonderful man that voted for Hillary Clinton, that was friends with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, and is friends with the Obamas, the whole family. And everybody that they're friends with wants globalism. And it was he, H.W., that coined the phrase, New World Order. And we know what New World Order means. Bob Dole might be the last, not just the last Republican, doing it the old-fashioned way, standing behind the candidate. One of the last of the few, last of the good World War II survivors. And I have 2 people in my family that were in World War II. And for first to step on Japan, Hiroshima, to see the destruction. Very highly decorated men. George W. Bush, John Kerry, George H.W. Bush, all belonged to Skull and Bones as well. Secret society, who drinks out of the head of Geronimo's skull, lies in a casket, and they speak about all their sexual escapades. And there's a myriad of different things they do that's just terribly awful. So both sides of the aisle are guilty of these secret societies. And it was Ronald Reagan who wanted to look into these secret societies, and shortly after that, he was shot, didn't die. We have one other president, 2 presidents in history that didn't belong to secret societies. That's Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. I suggest you look into the Skull and Bones yourself. We used to look at him as an awful, awful man, and W as an awful, awful man. And it wasn't until we realized that they were friends with the Clintons and the Obamas that we changed our minds. Oh, they must be good. All of a sudden, all those Democrats that hated him, just because they jumped on the bandwagon of hating Trump. But they're the ones who severed the Republican Party, where there was hardly anyone standing behind Trump that was a Republican in office. And it was the Bushes that led the way. Just some things to think about. I salute you, Bob Dole, for being the good man that you are and doing it the right way, because you stood behind our country and you don't want to fracture our country, and you don't want this division that's in our country right now, the civil war in this country You're a great man, and I will miss you when you're gone. Good night, everyone.